So before I get into all that, I want to spend just a minute talking about 1WorldSync. The chances are we're probably doing business with almost all of you in the room. If you sell products at Walmart, Target, Lowe's, places like that, you're probably a customer of ours. And what we do really well at 1WorldSync is help you take all of that product information and data that sits inside your enterprise somewhere, bring it together, and distribute it outside your enterprise to do things like enable commerce, right, by doing item setup at Walmart, or perhaps comply with transparency initiatives like EU 1169 for some of you who may be doing business in Europe. So as you can see, we do work in a lot of different countries around the world, and we do business with most of the Fortune 500. So I want to start with what is enabling the connected consumer and what's really driving all of this, and it's about technology, right? The rapid pace of change in technology over the past 10 to 15 years is actually really remarkable. And I think the shining example of that is the adoption of smartphones, reaching a penetration of about 3 billion units in a matter of 6 or 7 years. So, that's incredibly impressive. I mean, if you think about radio as an example, right? It took radio some 30 plus years to get to about 50,000 users, right? So look at the pace of adoption here. That's one remarkable thing. The other remarkable thing is now you have almost everyone walking around with a little supercomputer in their pocket. And as a result, their expectations have changed when it comes to making purchases and buying things. And I think the best example I can give, I'll tell a little story, kind of a before and after story. If I go back to my very first business trip, it was in the 90s, and I went to Amsterdam. Now, for those of you who've been to Amsterdam, I'll probably leave out all the good parts. But I will tell you that my trip to Amsterdam started with me calling the airline, right, spending a bunch of time on hold, trying to find a flight to Amsterdam from Philadelphia and back. Then I had to call Marriott, spend some more time on hold, book a hotel room, right? When I got to Amsterdam, I had to go out and wait half an hour or so for a cab to show up. I do remember the cab being a Mercedes, though, and as a young kid who had only been in cabs in New York City with those really crappy Caprices they used to drive around, that was kind of cool. I got to the hotel at the Marriott, and I had to go to the concierge to ask him, hey, where can I go find some place to eat, right? So I spent a lot of time, and I had very little information at my fingertips at each decision point throughout that trip. Now compare that to my trip here to Chicago, right? I got out my smartphone, I opened the Marriott app, I saw all the hotels they have in the city, their location, all the different rooms they had, I saw ratings and reviews. It took me about 5 minutes to book a hotel room. Did the same thing with American Airlines when I booked my flight. As soon as I got into Chicago last night, my Uber was waiting there for me at the airport, right? Pamela gave me a very nice ride down to the hotel. When I get to the hotel, I check into my room. My key was waiting because I checked in online, so I didn't even have to wait in line. I just walked up, picked up my key. I opened my Foursquare app on my phone, and because Foursquare knows me, it knows my preferences for food, the kind of stuff I like, it recommended this really great Peruvian restaurant called Tanta, for those of you in Chicago. If you haven't been, I highly recommend going. Really good. So just think about the comparison between those two stories, right? The first one was kind of painful and didn't leave a very good taste in my mouth. It wasn't a very good experience. The second one, all of those things that used to be so hard were made so easy, and I was so well informed along the way. Why, when I go to buy a TV, right, or buy some sort of food product, is it that hard for me to get the specifications about that TV or find out about allergens in that food product? And that's really what is happening with consumers today. We have given 3 billion smartphones, little supercomputers, to consumers in the world, and their expectations have dramatically changed. And once those expectations changes, you can't get us to go back, right? I'm not calling the airline to book my flights ever again. It's just not going to happen. And at the heart of all of that is content, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But first, I want to spend some time talking about the impact that smartphones have had on e-commerce. So you can see here two things I think are evident from this slide. Number one, smartphones are really driving growth in electronic commerce. Number two, the pace of growth on smartphones compared to desktop is almost double, right? So it's all about the smartphone, and it's all about the convenience that smartphones provide to consumers. And the impact on retail is tangible. If you take a look here, and we talk about the impact on retail for a second, here's Amazon's revenues. And just look at that little hockey stick. This only goes up to 2013, right? They're well over $100 billion in revenue in 2016. And a couple of things about this are really, really interesting. When you think about e-commerce as a total percentage of retail in the United States, as an example, it's probably only around 8%, maybe 9% tops after 2016. So that begs a couple of questions, right? Well, Ken, if e-commerce is only 9% of my total sales, how much should I really worry about it now as opposed to the future? And I think my response to that would be, well, first of all, there have been a lot of studies from research firms out there, probably the most notable of which is Forrester, who has really come to the conclusion that while maybe only less than 10% of actual commerce in the United States is happening via e-commerce, over 50% of those purchase decisions are influenced by our interactions online. We're researching stuff before we buy it. Whether or not to find out that TV is going to fit in my cabinet, right? To make sure I'm not allergic to something, to make sure I'm not going to eat too many calories and blow my daily diet, whatever it is. I expect information to be at my fingertips when I'm making purchase decisions. The other thing I would say about that is, if it's less than 10% now, and over half of purchases are being researched online, there's a tremendous opportunity for growth, right? That 10% number is going to increase year over year over year. If you look at last year's retail sales, they were actually in-store down. The only reason retail grew last year was because of the growth of e-commerce. Ultimately, what that means, if you want to capture market share, you've got to be ready for digital commerce. If you don't get ready for digital commerce, you're going to lose market share over time as digital commerce becomes more and more prominent. Now, getting ready for digital commerce certainly isn't easy, right? As I mentioned, the expectations are really high on the consumer's part. So we have to make things, and I'll summarize this in just, I think, a couple of words, really easy for consumers. You've just got to make it super easy for us as a consumer to buy things, right? You've got to know who I am. It's got to be personalized. You've got to know where I am. I'm in Chicago and I like South American food, so give me a good Peruvian restaurant to go through. Thank you. You've got to know who I talk to online. You've got to be aware of what my friends' tastes and preferences are and how they influence me. And ultimately, it's got to be content-driven. As consumers, we're after the information that you guys work so hard to create and collect and aggregate today. That's a lot of the information that we want. And I think there's a good example I can give you of where we're starting to see the disruption about a consumer's preference for digital commerce and making their decisions easy. And it's in the consumer wholesale business. So how many of us here like going to Costco on a Saturday afternoon, waiting in line for about 2 hours to buy toilet paper, right? Okay, good. No hands. Maybe one. That's kind of strange. They do have good samples. I'll give you that. No one really likes that, right? It's just toilet paper. I want to buy toilet paper online. I don't want to have to go to Costco for that. So I give Costco a little bit of credit, right? They said, okay, we'll make a mobile app. What am I going to do with that, right? Warehouse locator. Well, I don't want a warehouse. I just want to go to a store. Is a store the same thing as a warehouse? My point is, this is maybe not the best experience for a consumer. Now take that little competitor mentioned in that previous headline from Fast Company, boxed wholesale, right? Bulk made beautiful. Look how pretty that is. Anyone in the room use boxed besides me? Am I the only one? Okay, you probably will. This is a really great app for reordering the consumables in your house that you're constantly using. And you can see here, the user experience is really rich. It's content-driven. Look at all of those pictures. If you were to dive into any of these categories or any of these products, you would find a lot of detailed product information, right? Is this Lipton iced tea caffeine or caffeine-free? All of that stuff, it's there. These guys get it. I had dinner with a member of their board recently. These guys have turned down buyout offers from Costco and the like. They will be a 9-figure business within a year or so. Now, they're only a couple years old. They're winning because their content is so good. Which leads us to an interesting observation. Digital commerce, whether it's a website or a mobile app or some other mechanisms I'll talk about in just a minute, without good content, kind of like celebrities without teeth, right? Look, I want to like Leo DiCaprio, but he's scary looking there, right? I can't like Leo. I want to buy from Costco, but I can't use that mobile app. That was just awful. I got to tell you, too, putting this slide together was probably one of the most frightening things I've ever done. Do not ever Google celebrities without teeth. It's painful. I do want to make a point, too, that content is not just about rich media and pictures and for use on mobile apps. There has been a rise, especially in the last 12 months, of something called conversational commerce. And that really is a tip of the hat to the rise of voice and text as a user interface mechanism, right? So the winner of the Amazon Echo earlier, you're going to love it. One of the things that Amazon did with the Echo, probably not very surprisingly, is they made it really easy to buy stuff from Amazon using the Echo, right? I'll be standing there in the kitchen and I'll say, Alexa, please reorder, light bulbs. Anything I bought from Amazon, it makes it really easy to reorder. You can do some really fun stuff with Alexa too. Like I use the remote and I play Simon Says with Alexa when my wife is in the kitchen and I'm on downstairs. So I'll say, Alexa, Simon says Ken is the best. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Alexa will say to my wife in the kitchen, Ken is the best. She gets all freaked out. A couple of weeks ago, Facebook made an announcement at their annual developer conference about bots. Has anyone in the room heard about bots? Okay, a couple people. So how many people in the room use Facebook Messenger? Show of hands. Okay, quite a few people know what Facebook Messenger is. So what bots are basically little micro applications or microservices that will reside directly in Facebook Messenger. So I can begin to do all sorts of fun things without leaving Facebook Messenger. I could ask Facebook Messenger, what's the weather? I would just type that in, and it would respond to me with a forecast. I could say, Facebook weather, how long will it take me to get to, or Facebook, how long will it take me to get to work? It'll give me a little traffic report. Or I could say, are there any shoes on sale that I might like? And I'll get something like this. Again, just like the Alexa example, it's all about the content behind the scenes powering that microservice or micro application, also known as a bot within Facebook Messenger. One last example I'll give you about this is Siri. Siri is really good at knowing things about the stuff I'm putting in my body. So if I say, Siri, how many calories in this Snickers bar I'm about to devour, it will tell me, and I'll know whether or not how guilty I should feel about it. So again, the point is, product content has many, many purposes, from mobile sites, mobile apps, websites, Siri, Facebook Messenger. It doesn't matter. Content is driving the experience for consumers. Another thing that probably many of you in the room have heard of, and I'll actually ask, but another thing that product content is beginning to drive beyond just commerce is transparency, right? And compliance. We heard from USG about regulatory compliance and all the work that they have to do there, right? All of these things are moving into the digital realm and off your packaging at the same time. So how many people in the room have heard of Smart Label? Oh, good, a number of you. If you haven't heard about it, you're going to hear about it, right? Smart Label is an industry initiative for consumer packaged goods manufacturers being led by the Grocery Manufacturers Association. And it is all about taking the contents of your packaging and label and putting it into a very consistent digital format. So now, if I'm going to buy this box of Kellogg's at a grocery store, whether it is at Wegmans.com or Peapod.com, TedsFresh.com, right? I can get consistent access to the data about this box of Kellogg's in a consistent format, regardless of where I'm encountering this project or product in the digital world. Just like we have standards on packaging, we're now starting to see these standards emerge in the digital world. So product content is starting to drive commerce, transparency initiatives, as well as compliance with regulatory initiatives. That's why product content is so important. I think I probably would not call it a stretch to say that product content is going to be as important to the enterprise as customer data was a decade and a half ago. So I think in very much the way people who are working at companies like Salesforce were sitting at the epicenter of a brand new industry in CRM, all of us in the room are sitting at the epicenter of what is going to become of product content management and product data management. There's been a lot of studies around this too, on how to be successful in this world. And it kind of comes down to, as I've alluded to before, reducing decision complexity. So deciding what product to buy really should be as easy as deciding whether or not to have a nice cup of coffee on your deck on a beautiful summer morning, right? That's a no-brainer. Make it that easy for your customers to buy your products. So the Corporate Executive Board, which is a research and insights firm, it's been around for a very long time, did a survey. They touched about 7,000 consumers over a period of 3 months in like 30 different countries. And what they wanted to understand was how product content influenced their purchasing decision. What came out of that research was something that the Corporate Executive Board calls the Decision Simplicity Index, right? Sounds like something a research firm would make up. But what comprises the Decision Simplicity Index are two very important things. The first is, how easy is it to get and understand information about the products the consumer is shopping for? And the second is, how trustworthy is that information, right? So those two things, if you're a manufacturer, if you're in retail, and you can accomplish those two things, basically really, really good things are going to happen. You're going to sell more of your product. You're going to get more recommendations for your product. So I think this is a place that probably everyone would like to be, somewhere in that top 25%. I do, by the way, think that there's probably a first mover advantage as brands and retailers are really starting to figure out digital commerce. It's very early days. It's been around for a while, but it's still very early days. So the question is, how do we get there then, right? What do we do from here? Well, you guys are doing a lot of the hard work already, quite honestly, right? Getting all of that product content together. The picture from Hormel earlier, right, was an example of all of that content that is being aggregated by you guys on a daily basis and put into one place. And then when you think about that, how do you begin to bring together other pieces of information about that product from within your enterprise? So now you can actually create almost a 360-degree view of product information about your products for your customers and for their consumers. If you can get all of that data together, then you can find new distribution channels for that information to create new value, right? If I can now take all of the content that I brought into Blue Software as an example, so I can create my package, well, how can I use that to comply with Smart Label? Or how can I use that so that when someone asks Siri how many calories are in my product, it knows the answer, right? Get new value out of that hard work you've done by distributing that data as far, as fast as you possibly can, right? You want to have a continuous stream of fresh data making its way in front of your consumers as often as possible. That will do nothing but help you increase your market share. So I'll end with one little slide on how we do that at 1WorldSync. And we help our customers gather that information from PIM systems internally. It could come from PLM systems. Wherever it might sit in their enterprise, we bring it into our systems. And we're doing some really exciting things with Blue Software to make sure it's super easy for you guys to get the data in Blue into a system like ours so that then you can reuse that information, right? And get a whole lot more return on your investment of bringing that information together by using it for things like transparency initiatives, data feeds for retailer item setup or for Amazon Alexa, marketplaces, digital catalog, sales aids. There is no limit to what you can do with this content once you've got it aggregated together and have a mechanism for distributing it wherever it needs to go in real time whenever it needs to be there. And that's what we're here to help you with. So that's all I have today. Hopefully, like the bear here sitting in his summer home, presumably pondering the future of product content distribution. You guys will do the same after the conference today. And stay tuned for some more exciting news coming about what we're actually doing with Blue and the benefits you guys will get and the, I think, additional return on your investment with Blue you'll get from that partnership. Any questions?